Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon or evening, depending on where you are. One more time for anyone who's joined late, please feel free to change your Zoom name and also drop in the chat your team name or location, and then drop and your pronouns if you're comfortable, and also what you hope to get out of today's training. Welcome one more time to session 2 of the Basebuilding Leadership Academy series. Can we go ahead and jump to the next slide? And we'll go ahead and get started. Once again, today is session 2, Basebuilding Leadership Academy, the how and why of base building. Next slide, please. It's important to recognize Indigenous lands, especially in the climate movement. Indigenous people are the original stewards of the land we live on and continue to be leaders in the climate justice movement to defend the land, the earth, and a sustainable future. As a team, one of the ways to build your base is through allyship and connecting to other intersectional organizations and peoples. I encourage you to use this map to research what Indigenous groups are still on the land you call home and reach out directly to them to see how you can support their work and collaborate together to organize for a sustainable environment for our children. So these are our meeting norms. First of all, we'd like, whenever possible, for everyone to have their camera on. We know that life happens even when you're on Zoom meetings and webinars, so we don't, we understand if you have to turn your camera off momentarily or whatever, but whenever possible, we ask that you have your camera on. Be kind to others. Keep in mind that we're all here to support each other and not to tear each other down. Strive to be anti-racist. That's one of the key learnings that we hope to help with in these trainings. Respect pronouns. Learn to unlearn. Commit to self-transformation. And we encourage you to participate. And then lastly, step up and step back. So for anyone that is unfamiliar, that basically means anyone who's used to not talking a lot, we encourage you to step up. And for those who may talk quite a bit, feel free to step back and allow space for others to talk at times. All of our facilitators will have an opportunity to introduce themselves more in depth later, but for right now, I'll go through a quick introduction. Today's training will be facilitated by me, Jamie Valdez, by Dr. Velma Campbell, Danielle Dosunmu, Beth Predatis. I'm sorry, Beth, if I got that pronunciation wrong. And Alicia Gonzalez. Okay, so I'll pass it on to Alicia.
Awesome, thank you, Jamie. So I know that many, if not most of you, were able to attend our last session a couple days ago, and that was our first where we talked about some key terms when it comes to what we're doing here together. And so the first of those is base building. Before we go ahead and put the definition on the chat, I want to ask folks to, the definition on there, I want to ask folks to put it in the chat. So we're going to have 3 different words or terms. This is the first of those. If you all want to take a crack at what base building, what you think is a good definition of base building, depending on what you learned from the first session. Or if you want to if you weren't able to attend the first session and you want to take a crack at it, go ahead, and we'll give folks about a minute to just brainstorm and put that in the chat. So this is a definition for base building. Awesome. So we're getting some really good responses in the chat. And it looks like you're all right on the nose. If we want to click on that slide and the definition that we have, it looks like what we have here in the chat, a lot of folks are saying recruiting others into the organization, growing and strengthening your core group of active people, finding and mobilizing a community of like-minded activists. I like that. Bringing individuals into an organization who are invested in the mission and available to actively work on the cause. Yeah, and many of you said it right here. Can I have a volunteer to read what it says right there on the screen, the definition that we have for base building?
I'll volunteer. I was going to step back and let somebody else speak, but I'll speak up. Base building. Base building is the critical work of engaging the people most directly affected in a campaign or organization and developing their ability to collectively address issues they care about.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So it looks like many of you were right on the nose with that one. Let's go to the next one. And we'll do the same thing. The next term is transformative organizing. So do you guys remember talking about transformative organizing? What do you think that is? You can go ahead and put it in the chat. All right, let's get those definitions. I see Nikki from Kansas City said transformative organizing is making changes at a systemic level, not just personal. Awesome. Changing the systems. Yeah, multiplying individual efforts into group power. And then let's see what that definition is up on the Google Slides. And if someone can read that, awesome. Who can volunteer to read?
I'll read it.
Yay.
Transformative organizing works to transform the system, the ideas of the people being organized, and in the process, empower the community and the organization to commit to the process.
Awesome. Yeah, and so sometimes we use the term transformative juxtaposed with the term transactional. So when we're having transformative relationships with people and engaging people, we are turning ordinary people into activists and getting them to do extraordinary things. And that's the transformative part of that relationship. We're not just, engaging in a transactional, one-sided relationship with folks, but we want to really, through this relationship, transform each other and really have a meaningful entry into our movement for that new volunteer. And then let's go ahead and pull up that last term. If folks want to throw your best guess into the chat for intersectionality. And then this is based on what we had talked about in the last session as well. So if you were there, maybe you will remember what we talked about. So intersectionality and then if we want to, just for time's sake, pull up that last definition, and I will just ask for a volunteer to read it. Awesome. Single issue struggle because we do not live single issue lives. All issues intersect, and to solve one needs adjusting the other. So those are a couple of the comments from the chat. And then can I get a volunteer to read the definition, please?
Yeah, I'll do it. Intersectionality recognizes the interrelated and interconnected ways various identities of oppression and organizing issues overlap, and shows how we must work for justice in all of these aspects or issues together.
Awesome. Exactly. And thanks for that. And it looks like the comments in the chat, I think those are also just right on the nose. We talk about intersectionality, especially in the climate space, because so many of our issues that we are, working on are not necessarily just issues that concern environmentalism or issues of a climate nature, but a lot of times the climate crisis is going to affect people on the front lines first. And that usually means people at that intersection of race and class that makes them vulnerable to experiencing climate effects before some of the people who can afford to dodge climate change for a little bit longer in their personal lives. So thank you all so much. And I think it sounds like you all had a really good grasp on the previous session, and we're ready to kind of get more into the meat and potatoes. Jamie's going to take it from here and go into setting up the session for today.
Thank you, Alicia. So once again, here we are in the July 31st, session 2 of this Base Building Leadership Academy, the how and why of base building. So now we're going to, I think we're jumping back to Alicia actually here.
Yeah, so thank you, Jamie. So we are, let me look at where we're at right now. Oops, I lost the Zoom. Here you are. Okay, great. So we're going to break folks out into small groups. And in this group, in our small groups, we're going to take those definitions that we just talked about, the intersectional, base building, and transformative organizing, and talk amongst yourselves in your small group about some ideas to make your own team more transformative, and what are some ideas that you have for base building, and what next steps in the next week or two can you think about taking to make your teams more transformative in nature, thinking about intersectional issues, and working to look at your team and change the way that you all operate based on what we just talked about. So let's see. Danielle, are you able to break people out into groups of 3 to 4, or who?
Yeah, so Carol's going to set up 3 different breakout rooms, and us facilitators are going to stay here in the main lobby.
Okay.
All right. I'm attempting to do that, but I'm not. Oh, I see. Okay, I think I got it now. Maybe.
And then you'll just be in there for 3 minutes. So you'll just be introducing yourselves and talking about some of the concepts we've learned about and how you can apply those to your team in base building.
All right, see what I can do here. All right, I'm going to open these rooms. I'm not sure that they're correct. This is awful. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Carol.
Oh, let me find somebody.
Yeah, so Carol,
Yes.
so it might be easier for us to just close all the rooms and then just do one room and not assign the co-hosts, because right
Okay.
now people are split all across the way.
Yeah, I can
So
see that. Yes.
yeah,
All right.
so
I'll close all the rooms.
okay. And are you good
Okay.
if I do that part real quick, just to put in the new rooms?
Okay, 50
Okay.
seconds.
Okay, yeah, I think that there's gonna be a
Just
issue
a
now.
few more minutes here. $11 seconds.
Okay, yeah, so I think we needed to have set it to 3, because now I'm not sure if we can. Okay, I know
Let's
what
just
to do
bring
now.
everyone back, and for the sake of time, let's just keep going,
Okay,
and we can just talk about it here.
Carol, do
I
you want me
think
to?
a little behind.
Carol, do you want me to do the next breakout?
How soon is it going to be? All right, so they're all.
Awesome. So does anyone want to share out something that they're thinking about in what comes to mind when you're thinking about transformative organizing and how you could apply that to your own organizing? And you can put that in the chat as
I think we lost Alicia.
Oh, really? Can you not hear me? Oh no. Hello?
I can hear you. We can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you.
So So do folks have ideas for making your teams more transformative or intersectional in nature? I can tell you one idea from California that we have done is some of the issues that we are that we're working on. We always think about examining them through a race and class lens. And so one of the issues was electrifying buildings. So a really easy kind of fix towards making that campaign one that was more intersectional was to think about multi-family units and not just thinking about pushing for, you know, buildings and new homes to be electrified, but also apartment buildings. So really even applying that lens to your actions and thinking about, you know, what are the asks that we're calling for? How does this affect not only people in my income bracket, but what about people who are, you know, of a different class or a different race than me? So Velma, did you have one?
Oh yeah, I was going to say in our discussions of various climate related and environmental justice topics, trying to bring out examples, deliberately bring out examples of intersectionality within those discussions, and then using that to identify communities or individuals or groups in our community with whom we might engage based on the intersections that we identify.
Awesome, thank you. And it looks like a couple people were also putting in the chat. Yeah, these are definitely ideas that we will tease out today a little bit more as well. So so yeah, no worries if we're still simmering. This is really just the beginning of introducing and digging into some of these concepts. So let's go to the next slide, and I will I'll kick it over to Jamie just to go over the agenda with folks, and then we'll get started. So can we move to the next slide, please?
Thank you. Thanks, Alicia, and thanks everyone for your participation. So a real quick review of today's agenda. We've already been through our intro and welcome as well. Next, we'll go into the cycle of organizing, base building review. Then we'll talk about some base building methods, including outreach to already existing centers of community, canvassing, tabling, social media, and then we'll go into work groups and then have a report back, and then we'll be at the end of the session. Next slide, please.
Awesome. So wanted to show folks our cycle of organizing here because recruitment never really stops and base building never really stops. Right now, many of us, because we're such a new organization, we're still building like our initial base, our initial group of folks, but that might change over time, little by little, because people join, people leave. And in 5 to 10 years, you know, hopefully you still have a group and it may be completely different people. And the aim is that they're all bought into the mission. They're all, you know, working because they believe in these issues and they believe in the movement, and they're connected to all of us through our organizing work. So that's what we're doing here. And the way that we want to be thinking about it is these 4 plates are kind of always spinning. And so on our teams, We're going to, at some point, your team started with recruitment. Maybe some of you are back to the drawing board in terms of recruitment, or maybe you are still trying to get your team to a critical mass where you have a good amount of people showing up that can share the work. So that's always going to happen. And then you will definitely go right into some of our best practices, which are tracking and following up and developing your leaders. So when you have your people together after you're recruiting a good group of folks, all this is to say that you want to have systems in place so you know exactly who is in your team, how to get a hold of them. Part of organizing is being organized in a really traditional sense of the word as well. So we want to make sure that we're able to know like exactly who's on our team, how do I get a hold of them, and as much information as is helpful to you. We have the ability here with our database at Mothers Out Front where we can make notes on people's records, and we can actually go into our volunteers, data record and write something about them or their kid that makes it personal. So you can really, save as much information as you can so that that person is able to work with anyone in the system, even if they don't have a pre-existing relationship with them. Someone will be able to pull up their record and see about them. Leadership development is also part of what you do. When you kind of get your initial group together, you want to make sure that people have their roles and that people are equipped with what they need to be in those leadership roles so that they can keep your chapter moving. And so part of that is these type of trainings, learning Nation Builder, learning those things that we're talking about in terms of like the resources and tools to keep yourself organized. Your team structure, as your team gets bigger and people have gotten those trainings underneath them, people will start fitting into their natural roles. And you can always shuffle those around as well. If you do have a team structure where you have a couple coordinators, you have someone doing like outreach and communications, you have a treasurer, and then you might pick someone up who's really good at being the recruitment captain, or you can always make different roles for people too. But you want to make sure you have some kind of structure, because then your membership knows what's coming and they can rely on having, an upcoming meeting that they know is always the 4th Tuesday of the month or whatever it is, so that you bring that stability and that reliability to the people who are looking at you to lead. And then you always want to use these actions like rallies or petitions to constantly be assessing your base and seeing how strong your team is. So in your campaign, obviously your main goal is to win that campaign. So say you want to advocate for more green space in your neighborhood and your goal is to win a park, your team's goal is also going to be kind of in the back of your head, watching to see in that big rally that you put on to advocate for green space, how many of the 100 people showed up, and how many of your leaders were able to make good on their responsibilities that they had for the action. And then you want to debrief those campaign events and those actions, and always use that as a chance to just get better, and always think about ways that you can do things more efficiently and be there for the volunteers in your chapter. And that's why the cycle goes back to recruitment, because we're always going to be building, and it's like a snowball where we want to just be rolling down that hill and getting more momentum. So that's the cycle of organizing. I'm going to turn it over to Velma. talk about.
Hello. Thanks, Alicia. That was terrific. We're talking about climate change and organizing and all those important facets of intersectionality and transformation. Why? Because we're going to talk about power, climate change, and the fight in which we're engaged is a fight for power to create change, to create the just climate that we're all interested in. So why don't we think about that, and in the chat, put some thoughts about what are some of the special interests that have power in the climate change discussion. And while you're thinking about it and chatting in, maybe if you want to put something that makes them powerful, that might be interesting to see also. Yep. Beth says, right, mega industries, fossil fuels, all levels of politicians, and Beth says dollars, dollars, dollars. Do we think that money is one of the equivalents of power in our politics today? You bet. And that brings me to the question about power. Can we fight them alone? And why not? And I think the answer to that is pretty obvious, because the people need to have some kind of currency other than money that is going to create that power for us. How we can get the power to fight the special interests, such as fossil fuels, oil and gas industries, plastics industry, and other polluting industries, is in numbers. That's the name of the game in organizing. And if you want to go to the next slide, we'll see that thank you. Together, we have the power if we have the numbers. That's the name of the game in organizing. Movements, mass movements, come from massive groups of people working in concert to put pressure on the people who can give us what we want. I think we've seen examples of that over the years. In the 1970s, when people hit the streets on environmental issues, and we ended up with Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, and so forth. So that's the name of the game, and that's how we fight for climate change at Mothers Out Front. And let's move on to Jamie to talk more about base building.
Thanks, Velma. So we just reviewed this definition of base building with Alicia. Thank you, Alicia. And we're going to be going a little deeper into what base building is and how we use it now. Base building is the foundation of good organizing. It's the critical work of engaging the people most vulnerable and most directly affected in a campaign or organization, and developing their ability to collectively address the issues they care about. Next slide, please. So why is base building important? Base building is the core strategy for building community power. Once constituents, or the people directly affected by the problem we're trying to address, become a part of your team, they are your base. A large base that you are constantly replenishing connects your organization to the community. You know what is going on at the ground level. You understand how people are experiencing the issues, and you know what will move people to action. Next slide. Base building is continuous. It's not static. You constantly build your base even while engaged in other activities. It's non-linear. Base building steps do not always follow each other in the same order. People enter the organization in a range of ways, and organizers adapt to that. It's analytical and nuanced. You exercise judgment about how much time to invest in each person to deepen his or her involvement. It's persistent. You call people many times to get them to commit and to remind them to turn out to actions. You contact them in person, by mail, and by phone. It's time insensitive. You spend a great deal of time bringing people into the organization, keeping them involved, and developing their leadership. It's about relationships. You talk to dozens of people on a regular basis. Everyone you recruit and develop has a relationship with you, with other members, and with the organization. It's directive. You have a focus. You bring info and people into the organization. You are not an outreach worker taking info out to the community, but rather bringing info and people into the organization. You do not seek people to help you. Instead, you look for people who want to build power. Next slide. Okay. There are 3 rings or layers of base we look to involve in recruitment, and there are different outreach strategies for each. First, the core is those most impacted by the issue at hand. In this case, climate change and environmental degradation. And those folks who have a desire to change things. This is one conversation or wrap. The second outreach strategy is for those impacted but not active. How can we help them transform from people impacted to people taking action? Finally, the mass base are those larger numbers of people who have a direct connection to the issue and are allies. How can we involve them? We use a different approach or wrap or strategy for each. Next slide. It helps to know what we call the rule of organizing. That is, that we need to talk to approximately 10 times more people than we want to turn out to an event or meeting, etc. Organizing and base building can be a science and an art in this way. So when doing outreach for a specific purpose, you always want to be strategic and purposeful in your planning to set your team up for success. So we encourage everyone to chat in and tell us what are some of the tactics you currently use in your Mothers Out Front team to build your base. Go ahead and drop it in the chat. Social media, yep. Any other ideas or thoughts? Finding locally focused issues that connect to people's lives in our area. Good. Any others? Please continue to feel free to drop your ideas in the chat, and let's go ahead and move on to the next slide, please. And now Beth is going to go ahead and take over and share with us some base building methods.
Thanks. I appreciate that, Jamie. And yeah, it looks like folks are putting in the chat many of the things listed here. So we're going to cover in this in the remainder of our time these 4 different methods of building your base. Outreach to centers of community or gathering places. We're going to talk about canvassing. We're going to talk about tabling, and we're going to talk about social media, which I saw in the chat. So all of the stuff that folks are putting in the chat are great. Could we have the next slide, please? And I only have the task of talking about outreach to centers of community. Next slide. So I'll introduce myself briefly. My name is Beth Cordatis. I'm a volunteer with Mothers Out Front, and I joined the organization in 2019, I think in January of 2019. And my Richmond team in 2019 decided that our first big campaign was going to be to respond to a local issue in our area. We discovered that in Charles City County, which is about 30 miles east of where I live in the Richmond area, it's a rural majority minority county. 2 enormous gas plants were proposed for that community. If both of those gas plants had been built, they would have contributed 10 million tons of carbon equivalent emissions every year. And they were being really pushed through the permitting process very quickly and quietly. And we were discovering that this was not receiving the local attention that we felt like this issue deserved. And so that was the issue that we decided in our Richmond team that we really needed to focus on. But we really understood that we needed to figure out how to build a base to help us, because otherwise it was just like a handful of us worried about these problems, about these enormous gas plants. Can I have the next slide, please? And so probably the really important thing to describe about the strategy we used to build a base of folks working on this issue was we realized we needed to identify centers of community. So organizations or groups of people who already are out there working together in community, maybe groups that are already very efficient and have a lot of community power, that have strong broad networks. So by identifying these other kind of like institutions or groups of people, these centers of community, and bringing them into the conversation with us about these gas plants, we felt that we could build our base. So there are centers of community all over. I mean, this slide gives you lots of examples, certainly like citizen associations, schools, your PTA, your parks, your like folks that work, maybe like if there's a garden group or like the friends of your local library, or groups that might have some kind of shared interest in what you're doing. That's a really important place to go and find other folks who might be willing to partner with you on an issue that you're working on. In our case, we really concentrated, because we were advised in a rural majority minority county that we should try and reach out to folks at churches. And so that was probably the first and most important thing we did when we were working on addressing the gas plants and the permitting process of that. This was in like spring of 2019. So if you could, next slide, please. So what we ended up doing is we ended up making a connection with the senior pastor of Cedar Grove Baptist Church. And right here, you're seeing a picture of the inside of Cedar Grove Baptist. This is a historic African-American church in Charles City County. It was only about 5 miles away from one of the 2 of the gas plants that were being proposed for the county. It's been really the hub of the organizing that we've done in Charles City since 2019. And so we still have the senior pastor from Cedar Grove and the clerk from Cedar Grove as core members of an organization that formed in opposition to these gas plants. And we had a lot of our meetings at Cedar Grove Baptist. And importantly, thinking about this as a center of community, we also really worked as a partner with this church and folks from that congregation, rather than, approaching it in a transactional way, as we were talking about before. We that are interested in collaborating with and like supporting the things that this group was working on. If you could, next slide. Yeah, great, thanks. So figuring out how to make a connection with the folks in Charles City County was our big challenge. When we realized these 2 gas plants were being kind of rushed through the permitting process, I'm not from Charles City County, and I actually didn't have any really personal connections in that county. And so the strategy that we took to make these connections was we pulled up Google Maps. We found the location of the gas plant on the map. And then we started to Google map all of the churches in that area and made a spreadsheet. You can get addresses, phone numbers, wait, I said that already. You could get like sometimes like the names of like the senior pastor from Google Maps, or, just from some careful Googling using the information like the name of the church. And then we just wrote to all of these churches. Sometimes it was an email, sometimes it was a social media post, but that didn't turn out to be particularly effective. I think, folks don't really take it seriously when it's just an email. It seems like spam. But instead, we would send folks an actual letter, like typed up letter that I printed out on my computer. And one of those got in the hands of the senior pastor at Cedar Grove. And we invited them to a informational session to talk about the gas plant. And the senior pastor brought 10 members of his congregation with him to that informational session. And then things kind of snowballed from there. And they became really the core leaders of the resistance against these gas plants. And just real quick, if we could go back one, I'll just say that it was really important that once we made these connections, that as mothers out front, we didn't just swoop in and like say, hey, this is what you all need to do. Once we made those connections, we worked in community and really in support of what the folks from Charles City County wanted to do. So folks from the county made all of the policy, and we did stuff like, make the Google group for them, or help them by making the website, but they told us what to put on the website, or set up the meeting and then we showed to the meeting, but we didn't do the talking, they did. So it's really important when you're building a base that you really think about ways to make sure that that base really does get the leadership role and support the folks from the community, so that you really can empower them to do the work that you all come together to do. And I'm happy to say we formed an organization with the folks from Cedar Grove and from some of the other folks we made contact with in that early January, like that spring of 2019 advocacy push. And they formed an organization that's still around today. It's called Concerned Citizens of Charles City County. They've done some incredible work, and most importantly, they had a lot of success. They got both of those gas plants canceled. There were a couple pipelines that were supposed to supply the gas plants. All of those, of course, were also canceled. And so they had lots and lots of happy news, and they're still out there doing lots of advocacy, addressing concerns about a local landfill, and they're working on a community garden now, and we continue to support them. So yeah, it's a happy story. So if you could name some centers of community that you can go to for outreach, if you're maybe thinking about a local issue. We turn to churches, but maybe there's a better center of community relevant to the kind of advocacy work that you're working on in your own community. And I don't know if we want to move to the next slide while folks are thinking about that.
Thanks, Beth. That's such a fascinating story, and it's a great strategy to reach out to local community groups and community centers. We do that often too. Velma and I are now going to talk a little bit about tabling as another tactic that we often use. Velma, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself? And we can go to the next slide, please. You're muted, Velma. You want to go ahead and...
Yep, I know. Thank you. Finding the right buttons to push. Well, it's nice to be here. Thanks, Jamie. I'm Velma Campbell. I'm a member of Mothers Out Front Colorado and part of the Pueblo team. I say that Pueblo is my home and the heart of my activism for a community and a world where all can thrive, particularly the children and the future generations. So it's going to be fun to talk with you about one of our favorite activities. Jamie, why don't you introduce yourself?
Happy to. Thanks, Velma. Once again, everyone, my name is Jamie Valdez. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm a community organizer for Mothers Out Front for the Southern Colorado region, and my pronouns are he, him, elle. I'm a parent and a grandparent, and I'm concerned about the world we're likely to leave for our future generations. I'm also a native of Pueblo, Colorado. I've lived here, born and raised. I have moved away for short times here and there, but always end up back here in Pueblo. For a little background, Pueblo is a low-income community. We've got 25% of our population at or below poverty level, and a median household income significantly lower than that of the state or the nation. And our population is largely Latinx and Indigenous. And like other frontline communities, very little political power is held by our community. I've witnessed, sorry about that, I kind of lost my place here. I've witnessed my community be used as a sacrifice zone for bottom of the barrel polluting industries nobody else wants in their communities all my life. And I recognize that working across race and class is absolutely necessary to make change on the scale required for the crisis at hand. With that in mind, one tactic we use to build our movements is tabling at community events and activities.
If while we're thinking about it, let's consider who has done tabling before. Let's see how many folks here have participated in that activity. You could either raise your hand in the reactions button or go ahead and put it in the chat. And while we're doing that, let's see. Well, that's a neat feature. Zoom tells me 4 participants have raised their hand. I never noticed that little Zoom function before. So it's not totaling them up. It's just telling me whenever people raise their hand. So at any rate, let's go to the next slide and think a little bit about what is tabling and why do tabling. To start with, tabling is simply the process of setting up a table at some event or location with information about your organization and issues, where you can reach out to lots of people, particularly in your target demographic or group of people that you particularly want to engage with. And that's usually going to be dictated to some extent by the events that you've chosen and vice versa. It's a chance to do what Mothers Out Front we call ground truthing, which is to listen to the community and learn more about the people in it, their issues, hopes, and strengths. It's also a chance to let the community learn more about Mothers Out Front and to share information about that organization. And it's turns out to be a good conversation starter. And it's a chance to make contact with people who might be interested in engaging with Mothers Out Front and get their contact information while we're at it. That way we can follow up with people that we meet at these events. So if you want to enter into the chat, what else might be accomplished by tabling? What other kinds of things might benefit your organization by tabling? While Jamie shares with us more specifics about the importance of tabling. Jamie, my turn. You're muted.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Velma. Anytime we plan to work in any community, especially those related to a culture or specific identity, if we're not familiar with the culture or identity of the community, we should do some research and go into the event with an understanding of why we're there and what we are celebrating or commemorating or honoring, etc. We want to not only show our support, but also actively participate in the celebration or commemoration or whatever, to whatever degree is appropriate and to which we feel comfortable. These are perfect opportunities to learn about the communities with which we hope to engage. With that in mind, we want to meet them where they are, both in a literal sense. I mean, we're going out to community events. Sometimes they may be held by, a certain portion of your population. For example, Cinco de Mayo would be a mostly Latinx indigenous community. And so you're meeting them where they are in that sense, but you're also able to talk face to face with people, ask them questions, get an idea of where they are with their understanding of the local issues, and meet them where they are in that sense as well. We also want to learn about the communities with which we hope to engage, find common ground, build trust, and have fun. Smiling and laughing are contagious, and when we smile, we look like we're having a good time and people want to be around us. It's welcoming. These events are often related to celebrations of some kind, and it's okay to enjoy them. Ultimately, folks are more likely to show up for us after we've shown an interest in building a relationship based on community and trust. So why is tabling important for organizing? It's important for building community and showing solidarity, as well as for our own personal growth. Next slide, please. Oh, never mind. So drop in the chat, what are some events where your Mothers Out Front team could table to begin building relationships across a diversity of communities and demographics? And while you're doing that, I'm going to go ahead and tell you all, can we go to the next slide too, please? And while you are dropping your ideas in the chat, I'm going to go ahead and give you all a little background of a kind of a success story that we had here in Pueblo, Colorado, a couple of them actually. But first, I just want to mention when tabling, especially at cultural events, it's important to go into the event, like I say, having done some research and understanding the cultural significance of the event. So for example, I'll go into a little bit about Juneteenth. At midnight on January 1st of 1863, the Emancipation Proclamation took effect, and slaves in the southern United States were free. However, it would be another 2 years before those in Texas would be able to experience freedom because the proclamation couldn't be enforced in states under Confederate control. And it would take until June 19th of 1865 for the Union Army to carry out the proclamation. So this became known as Juneteenth. And on this day, we celebrate the freedom of a people. In Pueblo, Juneteenth started in 1978 as barbecues in the backyards of folks who moved here from southern states and brought the tradition with them. The celebration quickly grew in our community, and since 1980, Juneteenth has been celebrated as an official full-blown extravaganza with great food, music, guest speakers, and other fun activities. It's important to make these connections with the communities we hope to engage and the people we hope will support us and work alongside us. It's important to get out to events, even when we are not hosting, and have a presence in order to show an authentic desire to support and be a part of the community. By doing this, we build trust that will hopefully yield mutually beneficial relationships. This is how we build strong, sustainable, and diverse movements and organizations. So in 2021, we tabled, our team was here in Pueblo was still pretty new and being formed, and we tabled at our local Juneteenth celebration. And we were able to talk to a whole bunch of amazing people who were eager to learn about our work. And once they did learn about it, they were ready to proudly show their support. We weren't asking for money for our Mothers Out Front t-shirts that we were giving out, but many people insisted on donating anyway once they heard about our work. And several put the shirts on right then and there over the shirts they were already wearing. And keep in mind, this was on a sweltering 100-degree day here in Pueblo, which is one of the hot spots of Colorado. Before long, you couldn't look in any direction without seeing a Mothers Out Front t-shirt. Everybody was wearing them. Our name was getting out there, and we brought in over 25 brand new contacts who signed up for our contact list on the sign-in sheets. To top this off, we had a blast hanging out with each other and with other members of our community, and I can say from experience that the barbecue brisket was to die for. We've had several similar experiences, and just this year, last weekend, in fact, at Colorado Springs Pride Fest, we were able to bring in over 100 new signups in a two-day event. So get out there, build relationships, and have fun. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Jamie. That you're right. The brisket was wonderful, and so were the people. And I have to say, it's really fun tabling with Jamie, and we had other team members this year at Pride Fest. But Jamie lights up and brings that joy of organizing to other people when they start talking. So good example, and I've learned a lot. So let's talk about how to do tabling. So as Jamie suggested, it's important to pick your event thoughtfully and do research. Get permission from the organizers to have a table at the event. That can be a more or less formal process depending on the nature of the event. And sometimes it's necessary to kind of keep an eye out. The registration windows for tables and booths can open and close pretty quickly. You want to recruit and train volunteers ahead of time if you've got time to staff or woman the table. We try to create that rep or elevator talk and kind of practice on each other before the event, and to remind each other about what the particular issues are going to be. Logistics are important. Bring a sign. Remember the sign-in sheets. That's something that I've had to create more than one by hand because I forgot to bring them. So, and then remember to do follow-up work on the signups that we get after once the event is done. It's important to log those in and get ready to do the follow-up. Jamie, do you want to give us a little more detail about how we work our tables and bring us to a conclusion about tabling?
Sure, thank you, Velma. So as Velma was mentioning, you want to create a wrap or elevator talk, as I often call it, for the event that focuses on listening and learning about that constituency and identifying and sharing why Mothers Out Front has shared interests. For example, I often will start off by asking something like, are you familiar with Mothers Out Front? Or would you like to hear about our organization? And then letting them know that we are a mother-founded, mother-driven climate justice or environmental justice organization working toward the goal of a livable climate for all children, which I like to follow up by asking if they have any local climate or environmental issues about which they are concerned or have questions. In this way, I can learn what issues they know about and what issues are important to them. And that's a great way to kind of start off those conversations. This opens the door to talk about some of our local work on air and water quality, protection of public lands and wildlife, as well as our work opposing extraction, exploitation, and racism. At many of these events, especially those related to marginalized and oppressed cultures or identities like Juneteenth and Pride and Cinco de Mayo, you will often find folks willing to talk about the structures that uphold white, cis, hetero, patriarchal culture and how we can effectively overcome them. As Velma mentioned, logistics are always important. Make sure to bring a sign-up sheet and get contact information, a handout, some kind of a brochure, business cards, with contact information about Mothers Out Front and specifically about how they can get in contact with their local Mothers Out Front team or organizer are some suggestions that we like to throw out there. Be sure to nurture the new relationships you've begun. Do your follow-up, enter your data, and set up one-to-one conversations with interested people or organizations you've met with within 1 to 2 weeks at most. And I think that brings us to about the end of canvassing. Next slide, or tabling, sorry about that. Next slide, please.
Awesome, thank you, Jamie, and great work signing up 112 new supporters in Colorado. That was really awesome, and that was last weekend. And so, you know, that's really just a testament to getting out in the community, finding those places where you can rent a booth or a table and talk to your staff person who you work with the most. And we can make sure that you're connected with resources if you need them, because each team also has community team funds. And then, you know, we have tools and resources at the staff level as well. So I want to talk about canvassing with you all today. And then if you go to the next slide, I'll just introduce myself. My name is Alicia. We have been working together today. And so you have heard me speak, but I am the organizing manager for all of our operations in California and Colorado. And so kind of a Western region at the moment. And so it's been really great working with the Colorado team who's on here. I'm from California myself, and that's my son fussing in the background. And then prior to this, I worked as a union organizer for almost a decade, and then I went on to run campaigns, and I was working for Senator Elizabeth Warren, and I also did a few congressional campaigns before landing here at Mothers Out Front. So that's me. I'm just organizer and loving it pretty much. So let's go to the next. And so one of the things that I really love about organizing is meeting people that you might not meet otherwise, and having conversations and just getting to know people that you might not have met in your daily life. And so canvassing is a really great tool to that. So I want to ask folks here, because I know some of us do have experience with canvassing. If you have canvassed, can you just raise your hand or put it in the chat You can raise your virtual hand too, just so I get a sense of if you guys are new to this. So yeah, I see a few hands going up. I would say it looks like some folks probably haven't canvassed, but quite a few have, so that's awesome. And so let's go to the next slide. Why do folks think canvassing in particular is important for organizing across multiple demographics like race and class? Beth in the chat, yeah, have really thoughtful conversations. And you can definitely put this in the chat as well if you had thoughts, or you can come off mute. Why else is it important to communicate, or why is it important to canvass? Yeah, going to neighborhoods outside of your own, Jordan, that's a really good one. And let's go to the next slide and we can see some of the responses that you've been lifting up. So somebody did say this, meeting people in their own turf. So meeting them in their neighborhoods, in their homes, people feel a lot more comfortable and they're going to be more willing to talk and share about themselves too if they are in their home, because they kind of have a leg up at that point. And even though you're asking the questions, they're comfortable because they're at their home. So it's always good to kind of think about those communication norms as well. You're right there in the community. You can learn more about the community. I know when I'm canvassing, I'm also taking in information just passively about the neighborhood as you're walking through. And it's an opportunity, like we said, to facilitate a community-led process, making sure that we're getting the answers to our survey questions or our issues. We're not just sending them in an email and relying on the responses that come to us by the people who are most likely to read our emails and send us a response. But we're actually going into the community and helping to facilitate a true community-led process. So, and then we can also, have good conversations, and those really transformative conversations, a lot of times we have them there at the door. So, and let's go over some tips for canvassing on the next slide. So, so something that really we do suggest is always to go in pairs, one for safety, but I know one of the teams that I've worked with, for instance, they also split up their pairs based on having a Spanish and an English speaker in each pair that goes out. So that's another consideration. Your most important goal is to make that personal contact, connect and relate. So even if you don't get a hard commitment or a yes, having that conversation is really just what it's all about. Obviously you want to be polite, smile, show respect. A lot of this is going, obviously it's going to reflect on the organization. So when you're here, you're a representative of Mothers Out Front and of the movement at large. And we definitely want to make sure that we are being nice. We're not going to be filmed and put on Fox News or anything. And also, you don't have to be an expert. So I know that especially in the climate space, we have people who are, I think, really into policy, and it's awesome. I've learned so much from a lot of our folks about, various kind of wonky policy talking points and things that you might want to know before you get out there on the doors, but you're not going to have the answer to every question that comes up. And so just know that. And try not to stress about it. You can always say, I don't know, but I'll get back to you, because they're really going to remember the way that you made them feel. It's kind of that same quote. People won't remember exactly what you said, but they'll remember the way that you feel. They'll remember, I had a great conversation with someone from Mothers Out Front today. And so make sure that you speak from the heart, and don't get too hung up on the wonkiness of talking about a specific issue. Try to rely on your own narrative, your own personal stories. And even if you're talking about something that makes you emotional that they can't relate to, everybody can relate to that emotion in your voice. And when you're talking about something that is really meaningful to you. So that's the kind of conversation that we want to have on the doors. And so, and then on the next page, we do have a checklist here for you. You always want to make sure that before canvassing, there's a lot of planning that goes into it, and you can definitely work with a staff member on that as well as some of your volunteer leaders who have a little bit more training on these things as well. So doing your homework. So that's what we're talking about, a little bit of that ground truthing. Some of the ground truthing is actually done during the canvassing, but before we go into a neighborhood, we want to know what languages are spoken there, what kind of neighborhood, you know, that we're going into, a little bit about the demographics, just so that we're prepared. Make sure you have your rep. You know what you're going to say, at least at first, and then the rest is an organic conversation. Make sure that we're thinking about all the goals and the logistics that is part of that plan in the beginning. And at the end of it, one of the most important things I think of almost any event that you can do is the debrief. So evaluating afterwards, scheduling time on the front end for a debrief with your group so that you know that you'll have time to talk about how canvassing went and what lessons that you can learn and incorporate for the next time. There's always follow-up. 90% of organizing is follow-up. That's a little nifty organizer axiom. And so follow-up, that's the data that needs to be entered. If you have walk sheets that you've filled out, if anyone's been canvassing, sometimes you circle the responses on your paper sheets. Make sure you get those back to a staff person or someone who can input those into the system, maybe a member as well. And then lastly, I just wanted to show or to briefly talk about a canvassing story from California, if you want to go to the next page. And so I work with our team here in San Jose in California. And in 2018, they were asked to join the Protect Coyote Valley campaign. So Coyote Valley is a creek, and in San Jose, there's been a lot of issues with flood control and with protecting the Coyote Creek from flooding or preventing it from flooding. And this was actually an environmental justice issue. So 14,000 people in San Jose had to be evacuated due to the floods, and it caused $100 million in damages. So those most impacted were living in predominantly lower income neighborhoods, and many were Vietnamese or Latino. It says Latinx. Excuse me, that word always trips me up. So they, so what our team did there, since none of them spoke Vietnamese, but about half of them, almost half of them spoke, had a little bit of Spanish. What they did was actually split up into Spanish teams, or a team with one Spanish speaker, and then they translated all the lit into Spanish and Vietnamese. So even though they didn't have someone who spoke Vietnamese, they at least had literature that they could leave at those houses. And they had a few keywords that they had translated just so that they could have those conversations. So part of this this story, they ended up actually being successful, and they reached a deal with 3 of the landowners. So the San Jose City Council voted unanimously to provide funding to protect those working lands in Coyote Valley. And so we won our victory, and we were able to bring the community together, even working across a lot of, discomfort that some of our volunteers had with, they don't know how to, to speak Vietnamese. And some of them had very rudimentary Spanish, for instance. So I just wanted to show that example because I know that it's not always easy sometimes to outreach to people who are not like us and who sometimes don't even speak the same language as us. But you know, we do have some of those tools to help you, and a little bit of creative thinking, and talking to your staff about, you know, language translation, or talking to the folks and the resources that you do have to kind of work through planning, making sure that you understand the language needs of an area before going in. And because our group was able to plan and to think about what it really takes to work across race and class, they were able to do that in a really successful way. So wanted to just highlight that amazing example. And I'm sure folks have really cool canvassing stories I would love to hear about here as well. And then let's go to the next. Thank you, Jamie. Let's go to the next slide real quick. Oh, it's actually you, Danielle. So thanks, folks.
All right. Hi, everyone. So we're going to move into the social media part of the night. And I just want to uplift. So we're not going to be talking about like what buttons to push or how to do the things to like make a post in a certain platform or anything. We're really going to be looking at how social media has a role in being able to bring in more people into your team, and being able to engage more people in your community to be able to get involved. So basically, and how to build your base with social media. So we've talked about in-person things. So now we're going to talk about the digital version of all of that. So you can just imagine social media as like a digital door knock, phone call, or postcard campaign. So a lot of the things that we've already covered, and like with outreach, tabling, and canvassing, social media is just the digital way that you do that. Just depending on what you're trying to do, that is what can help to lead you to what platforms you use, what type of content that you put up. And that is really kind of where we're going to explore more, is really looking at, you know, how do you figure out how to digitally communicate? What's the best way to try to build up that aspect of your work as well? Next slide, please. And then next slide. And then just a little bit of information about me. I'm Danielle Dosunmu. I work at Mothers Out Front as the Senior Database Administrator for Community Organizing. So a lot of the information that everybody gets in their live events is what I help to track, measure, and analyze to make sure that we have a good way of understanding what's working when we're doing outreach and what's not. This is also very applicable to what we're going to be covering with social media. Next slide, please. So I am really curious to see, you know, this is just some of the million of different social media platforms that are out there. And to be honest, like I only have one of these myself. But I did want to reach out and see, you know, how do you all digitally communicate with your community? You know, drop in the chat what some of your social media platforms are that you use. Because I am really curious, because honestly, like Twitter scares me. Like, it's like, there's not enough characters. I have so many things to say. I can't do it. Huh. Great. Okay, I feel a little bit better because it looks like everybody's on the same page of like, we know like one or two. All the other ones, that's a little too much. All right, and then next slide, please. All right, so we're gonna just do some level setting for, oh, can you go back, please?
Yes.
Yeah, so we're gonna just do some level setting for some definitions we're gonna be throwing around as we're talking about social media. So analytics, you know, that's the lovely little charts and giggles and hoo-haws you'll see on the back end of your social media platforms. Usually they'll be like, oh, click this and we'll show you this, the analytics and things like that. Pulling it back in more layman speak, I'm like, it tells you who's looking at you. So that's what the goal for the analytics with social media is really to try to give you a picture or like a profile of like, it's someone who lives here or who's interested in these things or who looks like is this or does this. This is who looks at you. And so this is really where you kind of learn and understand who your audience is. And this is also the tool that we'd use to try to figure out what you can do if you're trying to reach a different audience. Okay, and then content. I think we all know what content is, but basically in social media speak, that's just basically like, oh, it's a picture that you shared, or it's a comment that you put up, or if it's a TikTok video that you put together, it's a lovely little infographic that you posted somewhere, or if you're me, it's like a freaking essay that's really supposed to be just a comment. I was like, but there's no character count stopping me. It's an article. And then landing page. So basically, you know, social media is kind of just like that first stop where people will see something from you, but you're really trying to get them to go over to do something else where your main information is. So the landing page per se would be like, you know, an event sign up. So if you put out a post talking about like, you know, this is a thing in our community, we need to uplift, we're going to be meeting about it and trying to get people in front of this important person who's a decision maker, do this. So, you know, in your post, you would have a link, and that link would go to your website that would have all the details about the event, people could sign up, et cetera, et cetera. Or it could lead to a petition people can sign, or it could lead to an information resource that you think it really is a companion piece to that little quick content that you put out on the different platforms. Next slide, please. And social media is a self-feeding cycle. It is a little bit of a monster. If you want to think about like Ouroboros, the snake eating its own tail, that is kind of how social media works. So, you know, the more active you are and putting out content, interacting with other content that's from other organizations or from other individuals that kind of align value-wise, the more you're going to get in front of people. So with the way social media works and the lovely algorithms, you know, you may have people who directly follow you. They're always going to see your stuff, no ifs, ands, or buts. But if there's people following them, they're also going to see your stuff too, even though they don't follow you. They might not see everything, but they might be some things. So social media really is a, like, you know, if you're, to put it in an in-person thing, you know, you have a really good conversation with somebody at a tabling event. They get really involved, they sign up to join your team, and then they keep telling their friends about all the amazing things that you guys are doing. And they're really interested, but like not at that point where they want to volunteer. But then they're like telling their other friends, and then they're telling their other friends, and then they're like, some of those other friends get involved, like the other original person you talked to. So it's really just kind of like a network of things and connections being built where the level of engagement just differs. Like a direct follower will see everything like what I talked about before, but somebody who might be an indirect might see or hear some things. And you kind of really want to not always just be putting out content. You also want to be looking for like allied organizations, like pretty much like what we talked about with outreach. Look at what's going on in those individual communities. Where are people already gathering or looking to digitally? Or participating in digitally that is related to the cause or the particular issue that you're working on in your community, or just in general that you think is value aligned. Because the stronger the bonds you can make with other like-minded individuals, the greater we can just have a more cohesive community that'll see all of our information together. So they'll see your team stuff, they'll see an aligned community stuff, they'll see the overall, like, the world is burning, we need to put the fire out content. You know, really this is a good way to really just, again, you know, it's just a cycle of feeding it all together, of just really building more connections to build up a network of everybody who is impacted by the cause. In reality, everybody is impacted by climate change, but only a subset of people in reality are either concerned and or will actually acknowledge it's a real thing. Let's be real. Next slide, please. All right, so one this is like the recipe here. This is really the nuts and bolts of how you can start to figure out, you know, maybe you have been doing social media, but it hasn't really garnered you anything. You know, you have a few dedicated followers, but then they never show up to anything. And you're like, but we put the link and we did the thing. I was like, I know they saw it. My analytics dashboard said that they saw it and they clicked on something, but they didn't show up. Like, what is happening? So really, you know, you want to kind of take a step back and try to figure out, okay, what am I doing on social media? I'm trying to communicate with my community. Cool. Who's your community? So you kind of want to lay the groundwork of like, again, you know, this is where we're talking about that data and analytics. Who is already looking at us? Are those the people that, you know, we want to talk to? Just those people? Or is there another subset of people that we want to talk to? This is very critical when we're thinking about trying to diversify teams and issues, because a lot of times, you know, the people who see you might be thinking is like, oh, they're like me. Okay, cool. But then there's people who don't recognize that you have the same concerns and interests and issues. And they're like, oh, well, I'm going to go over here because I feel like they get it. But you're like, no, guys, we're over here. We want to do this too. We're doing it too. So that's kind of where you can start really getting a grasp on, you know, developing a strategy for seeing, okay, we see these people over here who are following those people, and we want them to follow us. So again, you can kind of like build up some profiles of like, these are the people we talk to, these are people we want to, and that can be like the first step that you do as you're building out your social media plan for building your base. And then the next step after that is like, okay, content. Content is really going to be driven about based off of what are you trying to do? Are you trying to inform about an issue? Are you trying to get people to take action about an issue? Are you just trying to just do just basic, like, we exist and we do these things. See us, hello. You know, just basically, you know, what is the goal of the communication you're trying to do with your post? And then go from there to ensure that, like, okay, I know that Instagram doesn't really like a lot of wordies, but they like pictures. Do we have a good picture? And then what do we want to do with the picture? We want it to be a picture of the last rally that we did, promoting the next rally that we're going to do. So there you go. That is kind of how that would come together a little bit of like, okay, we're not going to just put a random picture of something up there that's not all related, put a little caption on it. Yay, meet up at something for something. I was like, okay, but why do you have a picture of a tree? It's like, I get it, like environmental justice, but like just a random picture of a tree, not quite doing it for me. So it really is just a matter of making sure that you make every post count. Consider it as important as every interaction you could have at a tabling event, at doing outreach or doing canvassing. You know, again, going back to this is like the digital door knock. You know, you're saying, hey, come look at me. I want to talk to you. And you just want to make sure that you're presenting them with the right kind of ideas. So, or, you know, you're like wearing the shirt or in some way showing it's like, I'm not just a random person who's just knocking on your door. It's like, there is a purpose to this goal of this interaction. And then again, going back to that self-feeding cycle, you know, you don't have to be constantly turning out content yourself. Again, it's all about, you know, you can kind of be a little bit more passive because let's be realistic, who has a dedicated volunteer who will do your social media? Some of you have someone who's willing to put something up sometimes, and then you have people like me who are like, I will learn how to do it, but like, you gotta give me the things. Or I'll be like, I'll give you the things if you press all the buttons, because like, I don't know, it changes every 5 minutes. It's a lot. So one way to kind of balance that out is like, again, when you're being more active and actually following people and looking at people that are common value aligned, you can start to build that web of like, okay, people who follow you will now see that content because you follow it and they follow you. So then you don't have to do the heavy labor of constantly have to turning out content, but you do have to be interactive. So again, you know, you're ensuring that you're putting out quality content and you're also following and sharing other quality content, just so that you're helping to bridge those gaps of getting people all collectively into the conversation. It's like, hey, yeah, that definitely is something that we're aligned with and we really agree with strongly. Let's share this and support it. Because at the end of the day, to be able to build your base, you have to acknowledge it's more than just what your team is doing. It's more about like what collectively we're all doing everywhere. So you want to start at that level of like you and me, we've got the same thing, but it's like us and everybody else also collectively have the same thing. So I know that was a lot. I went a little fast, but hopefully that gives you just like a little bit of a groundwork of really trying to think about, the next time you're going to push the button to post something, it's like, okay, what am I trying to do? What am I trying to say? Who do I want to see this? And that can really help just to, again, just have another avenue for you to be able to build your base and to really just meet people where they are. A lot of the times people can't necessarily show up and show out at spaces, but social media, if you have an internet connection, it's there. You can interact with it. So this is just another way to be able to reach the people who traditionally may not have had the ability to show up at the spaces that you're used to being at when you're in person. And that's a really good thing to know because, a leader can be someone who's out there hitting the pavement, doing canvassing, setting up the social media posts and everything like that. A leader can also be someone who has 3 kids, full-time job, a second side job as well, and who doesn't have the ability to do a lot of the in-person work, but they can do the digital communications and they can be the ones who are pursuing and researching other people you can be following. And that's just as critical and just as important as what you can be doing in person. So I just wanted to put that note out there just to let you know, it's like if someone is only interacting digitally, it's not just digitally probably what they're doing, but it could be just as valuable as, someone showing up for a tabling event or anything like that. And then next slide, please. And then, so the more you grow, the greater our collective power and your collective power to be able to make the changes that need to happen in your community and just the overall movement to really set that foundation for the future for our children and just everyone in general. So I hope that everybody has gotten a good sense of, social media. It's not too scary sometimes. And just, feel a little bit more comfortable of, thinking about it as it is a tool. It's another way to build your base. And then next slide, please. And then Alicia, we already have the breakout room set up if you want to go over the information.
Okay, great. So we're almost done. We're going to go back into breakout rooms before we close. And so in this breakout, you will put which base building tactic you want to focus on. And so it's going to be either outreach, tabling, canvassing, or social media. So you can put that in the chat, which one you would like to go into. So again, that's outreach, tabling, canvassing, or social media. And you can put that in the chat, and then we will break people out into those groups. So
and you all should be able to see the option now to self-assign yourself to rooms that you'd like to go to. So if you don't see those options, let us know, but you can start to just click breakout rooms and you should have the list of the four topics.
And if anyone needs help, I can also put you in a breakout room. Let's see. Velma just went to tabling. Anyone else put anything? No. So you just click the 3 dots on the bottom toolbar and it says more. If you click on that, it will say breakout rooms, and you can click on breakout rooms and then it'll show you a list. And then how long are we in these breakout rooms? I think just a few minutes, right? Because it's 5:43.
Yeah, we were
6
supposed to,
minutes.
yeah, it was supposed to be 15, but I think we just need to cut it a little bit.
I'm gonna, Carol, is it okay if I send you to tabling with Velma?
Sure.
Okay, or Anita or Falake? Falake? Which room did you want to go to? Well, it looks like we don't have anyone in tabling, canvassing, or no, we have one person in tabling. We have no one in canvassing or social media, and everyone else is in outreach.
Yeah, and these are just work group opportunities, so it's not really discussion based. So it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to go into each room.
Okay.
I'm curious about canvassing because I just haven't done it. So I'm curious about that. I'm not sure if that means I should go to that room or not.
Well, there will be a, it looks like people started going to the rooms already, but so we have a document that we put in the chat.
I saw that.
Yeah, so you can actually go to the canvassing and just fill out the document. And I can even go in there with you. Do you want to do that?
I have the base building plan document,
Yeah.
base building worksheet. That's what.
Yeah, so the goal is with these breakout rooms is each of us who did that topic will be there to be able to be there for questions while you fill out that plan. So if you're interested with canvassing, since Alicia was the one who was talking about canvassing, she could be there as a resource for you to go over as you're looking through the plan, how that relates to canvassing.
Oh, I see a breakout room I can join. Thank you for that.
Okay. So Falake, did you have what room that you wanted to go into? Okay, yeah, we can't hear you. If you want to just put in the chat which room you want to go into, we can put you in there. And then we'll have each of the presenters will go into those rooms and be there as a resource as everybody's working on their plans. Okay, I'll move you to canvassing. Oh, sorry, Carol, I had sent in the chat if you wanted me to walk you through creating out these breakout rooms or if you wanted me to do it, but then I figured you probably weren't able to see the chat because you're sharing your screen with the presentation. So I just go ahead and put them up. But if you want, after everybody goes, I'm more than happy to go over that part with you because I just want to make sure that I didn't steal your learning opportunity from you for that.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure what happened initially because, yeah, once I got everybody set up again, I created new breakout rooms. I guess I didn't know that we were going to do this. I think one of the things that can anybody else hear us?
No, but Andrea.
Okay. I should have gone through the slides before this. I think that would have been a good thing.
Hey, Andrea, don't know when we lost you because I know you've been
Hi.
coming out.
Yeah.
Did you have a specific tactic that we went over, like outreach tabling, canvassing?
I actually left because
Oh.
I'm not, I'm here in upstate New York and I'm not in a Mothers Out Front group. So
Okay.
it seemed like it didn't make sense to be in one of the breakouts. I hope I didn't mess it up, but I was trying to not.
No, and the
Yeah.
breakouts actually aren't really meant like as a discussion space. It's more for facilitator who did those. To
Yeah,
share.
I thought I came back just to say thank you so much because everything, I think it was really well organized, and that's why I came back, just to say thank you. I didn't want to be rude and just disappear. But I mean, to be honest, I'm actually I'm here in a rural community of Andes, New York, and on Tuesday I'm actually doing a vigil out on the street for the August 2nd, the People versus Fossil Fuels. And I'm kind of really nervous about it. And I'm going to talk to someone from Food and Water Watch because it is such a Republican area, and I'm only here part of the time. So, but it's been good because we've been talking about it on Facebook. Anyway, I don't know. That's like in terms of the tactics, that's like a visibility action, I guess, of some sort.
Yeah,
right?
and
It's not quite the same as what we've been talking about, but.
Well, I don't know. I think honestly, if you wanted to buy into like outreach tabling or like honestly outreach tabling or canvassing, that might be something that you can ask about, because we were just having people like kind of filled out a base building plan and then just have folks be there as a resource for questions. You have a very specific question. So I don't know that it wouldn't necessarily be that doesn't fit. It could just be a matter of like, for me, I think probably outreach would be a good fit because you're trying to do outreach about, it's a very specific type of way that you're doing your outreach. But maybe
I mean, the truth is I don't really have time to do anything. And it felt like, no, I mean, even on Tuesday, but it felt like, how can I not do something? So I'm just kind of trying to wing it and do the minimal, but without doing a negative harm to the movement, but do something that's positive and have a visibility. So yeah, I'm sorry. I'm just not, I'm just here because I'm excited about, how you're teaching this, and that's wonderful to learn. But I'm a little bit out of the loop these days because I have this huge project I'm working on here to get this house in order. So I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. I highly recommend, if you haven't already explored them, going to the Mothers Out Front website, and we have some toolkits and resources there that you can review if that might be helpful to you.
Okay, that is a good idea. Thank you.
Yeah, just for you to be able to have something on hand. You can be like, look, I know I'm waiting, I'm showing up, but you have a little bit of some knowledge of some things that you could do. Like if you snare someone's attention, how to keep it, grab it.
Well, I mean, there are at least 3 people who have already signed on that I didn't know before. I mean, like I feel very successful already that, because that something's happening. So that's good. But I guess they're really, like you said, follow up is so important. And I'm not sure I can do that. But so I'm wondering if it's worth it even to do it. But I think it is. I believe that just having a visibility when there isn't is a good thing sometimes.
Yeah. I monitor certain things for the organization, and one day we had somebody who did a fake sign up to like join our newsletter, right? And they put fake information, and so it was like they were like climate change deniers and all of that, and it was not a very positive thing that they slipped into their zip code. It was actually a message about us and what we do. But I was like, my immediate reaction was like, oh my God, we are so mainstream. Even to the point where they gotta go through hoops and have a plan to try to get their little opinion to us very specifically. Like,
that's a success. That's so weird.
Yeah. So it's like, you never know. You just by being there and have started that domino effect of just you felt something needed to happen that day. You don't know what that's going to inspire in others that'll help lead the movement forward.
And I've already connected with people that I didn't know were here, and but it is weird because I'm not really part of this community, so I'm trying to tread lightly.
Yeah, and it's well, I don't know, the sense of belonging and all of that yeah, if you're working on a very, 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 very specific niche thing in the community, that's one thing. But like if you're looking at it as an overall one piece of the puzzle that could be helping move it forward, I think that can help just a little bit.
Thank you. Yeah. And I mean, I'm basically like, it's an emergency. There's no planet B, you know, for our children and grandchildren. I mean, those are the kind of signs we're going to have, and we're just going to do it for an hour.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know.
Hey, you know what? In that hour, you could have changed someone who didn't have a thought about it either way.
Yeah.
How
Well,
much you never thought about it?
and it's amazing how much negative reaction it's gotten, but we've had really civil dialogue on the Facebook page, and this other woman who's the administrator of the page has been like awesome, you know, so she's been like coming up with all these facts and, you know, dealing with the farming community that's here. And so like you know, she knows I'm an ally. And anyway, okay, I'll be quiet now. They're coming back. Okay, right? Group report back.
Oh, we just
Yes.
did the slide just in preparation, but yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah. But
Yeah. So, but also because of like they were calling about the demanding a national climate emergency, but then this whole Inflation Reduction Act came. But of course, it's so conflicted. I mean, what are you guys thinking about that? The Inflation Reduction Act. We're happy, but we're also very not happy, right?
yeah, it's just kind of like, you know, for every step forward, there's 80 steps dragging this back.
Exactly. Right.
Progress
So
is progress.
But we should be supporting it, right? Right.
Yeah.
I mean, so I don't know. I mean, I don't know. That's what I'm confused about.
Well, it just depends. It's like, what do you feel is enough? What do you consider like, is it a step in the right direction?
And
or
it is.
that's just
Right.
another thing that's going to keep us in this loop
Right.
of like, we're going to keep having the same conversations for
Right.
50 years until we all die.
Right.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the main session. Most people were in the outreach group, I believe. And so, yeah, Jamie, did you want to ask for volunteers?
Sure. I think we have enough time for a quick report back or two. Do we have anyone that would like to report back on their base building plan, what they've started so far?
And remember, step up.
That's right. Any takers?
Beth, do you want to?
Yeah, I took notes. I was just typing in the chat. Did any of you all wanted to speak for us? But Kathy, did you want to?
I can, but you have notes. I just
Okay, I'll start us off, but then I'll encourage you, please, to chime in. Okay, great. So we were in the outreach group, and we talked a little bit about a conundrum that we all were experiencing as we work on trying to draw people in and like build a base. We feel like sometimes one of the challenges is identifying what the ask is, or what the campaign that we want to collectively get folks to work on. We might have like sort of a broad sense of like, this is the problem in this community. So Kathy described really kind of trying to work on affordable housing as a climate issue in her own community, but then figuring out how do you, when you like maybe identify like groups of folks, like maybe in public housing or at farmers markets that might want to come together and talk about that shared issue. Is there a way to kind of give them some guidance as to like what you're going to do about this thing, or what we collectively could do? And Nikki brought up a really great suggestion of maybe coming with a list of like 4 possible campaigns around affordable housing, and as the ask, inviting folks to say which of those campaigns might appeal to them most, or how they would want to frame that issue. How did I do? Did I get it all?
I think that sums it up pretty well. That's what we talked about. And going through the sheet in detail sounds really useful, looks really useful. We didn't have time to really get going, but.
Thank you both so much for sharing. We have anyone else that might be interested in quickly sharing their base building plan? No takers, huh? Oh, was someone speaking up?
I think our group was the only other group. That's probably why.
Okay.
So yeah, but we were the canvassing group, and so I don't know if Anita or Falake, did you want to say anything about why you're excited to canvass or anything that we talked about in the group?
I could add something.
Yeah.
So when I canvas, I usually have like issues kind of remembering what I'm supposed to say. Just canvassing is always a bit difficult for me, but I do enjoy it. So my biggest takeaway from our breakout session was like preparation. That wasn't necessarily one of like one of the aspects that we spoke about, but I think that was like, it's kind of an umbrella term. So being prepared in how many people like you would like to reach out to, what you're going to say, who you're going with, things like that. So I think being prepared for canvassing is when you'll find your biggest success with canvassing, and also like adjusting your expectations. So yes.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really good good point, is just prepping our volunteers, no matter if it's canvassing or tabling, with what they can expect for the day. So at tabling, you could talk to 100 people in one day. When you're canvassing, you might only talk to 3 to 5 people. And so it's good that the volunteer knows ahead of time that that's the case, so that they don't come back feeling deflated and like, you know, they wasted their time. Actually, it's really valuable that they just help us go through the list, and the conversations they do have are really high quality. So thank you. Great. And then we are at the end of our session. So thanks so much to everyone who was able to make it. It was really great to meet you all. Danielle just dropped a couple things in the chat. And the first is our feedback form. And then actually the link is missing, I think, from the feedback form. Oh, no, she put it. Okay, there we go. It's in the second one. So there's a feedback form. And then also we actually do have memberships as well. So we're not necessarily entirely funded by our grassroots donors, but I always want to give the opportunity to folks to participate in our grassroots movement. And at the level of the membership, you are at any level, you're really powering this movement, but we have a sliding scale so that it is accessible for folks at any level. And like I said, that just gives us more of a grassroots base, so that when we're thinking about who we're accountable to as an organization, and who is behind our movement, empowering our movement, it's always good to have as many grassroots, real people as possible, so that we don't have to go out seeking support from corporations and large foundations. So awesome. Well, thanks so much. Do you want to go to the next slide just so we can remind folks about our upcoming training? Awesome. And so the next session is going to be Thursday, August 4th. And we're going to go a little bit deeper into tracking and data. So we touched on it a little bit today, why it's important to have a really good organizational hold on your base. And we will be talking about that in more detail, along with a really important skill, which is our one-to-one conversation. It's a lot more planned than the people who are experiencing it might really know, but yeah, we always want to be prepared for those conversations, like Falake was saying. And thanks for everyone for participating and making this a really active session. And Velma, or, oh, Oh yeah, Jamie, there you are. Did you want to take us away?
I think you've done a great job, but thank you everyone for your participation, for being here, and for being a part of Mothers Out Front. We really couldn't do the important work of environmental justice organizing without you. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you. Bye, everyone. Talk to you soon.